Continuing education knows that at the end, students want to graduate, and we can help them do that because we take the time to really listen to their needs and we understand all the different options that are available across the campus for them.
We don't take a cookie cutter approach. We realize each student comes with their own story. So whether it's a part-time student looking to complete a degree program or someone just looking for online courses, we're there to connect them to the resources of the university.
I'm Stefanie Johnson. I'm a professor here in the Leeds School of Business and the director of the Center for Leadership. I'm so excited that you're here today and are going to have the opportunity to learn from our speaker, David Adelman. The title of this session is In Conversation with David Adelman. But before we get started, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement. The University of Colorado Boulder, Colorado's flagship university, honors and recognizes the many contributions of Indigenous peoples in our state. CU Boulder acknowledges that it's located on the traditional territories and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and many other Native American nations. Their forced removal from these territories has caused devastating and lasting impacts. While the University of Colorado Boulder can never undo or rectify the devastation wrought on Indigenous peoples, we commit to improving and enhancing engagement with Indigenous peoples and issues locally and globally. And we do this by recognizing and amplifying the voices of Indigenous CU Boulder students, staff, and faculty and their work, educating, conducting research, supporting student success, and integrating Indigenous knowledge, consulting, educating, and working collaboratively with tribal nations to enhance our ability to provide access and culturally sensitive support, and to recruit, retain, and graduate Native American students in a climate that is inclusive and respectful. Other things I want to mention for Conference on World Affairs is that we really love to invite questions from the audience, and so we will have note cards coming around, and you can write your questions on those cards. If you're a student, I see some students in the room, please put student or an S on your note card, and you can put your name, and then we'll invite some student questions up to ask a question toward the end. If you need a note card at any point, just put your hand up and a producer will come around and bring you a note card to write your question. So I'm going to do a brief introduction of David, but having had the chance to chat with David in the past, I think you really do the best introduction. So I will share that David is the CEO of Campus Apartments, the co-founder of FS Investments, founder of Darko Capital, and co-owner of the Philadelphia 76ers. But all of those are, Wikipedia stats. I think there's so much. I am
not the new coach of the Denver Nuggets.
And
That is a different David Adelman.
Did someone ask you that today?
Oh, I'm getting it.
Someone just asked me that today. They're like, you're interviewing the...
Timing was perfect.
I know. No, even better. Will you just share a little bit about your story? Because I think it's easy for people to think, you just were born into being the CEO of all these multiple companies and innovative, exciting opportunities, but this is really something that you grew and created.
Well, first, thanks for having me. It's always fun talking to you, and I love being back at Boulder, so it's great to be here with all of you. I wear a lot of different hats. They've come over different times of a career, mainly I like to say that I have a little bit of ADD and a little bit of OCD, so I like to do lots of different things for a very short period of time. I call it my day job. Started it's a Campus Apartments, student housing company based in Philadelphia. I have been doing that literally since I'm a kid. The founder of the company, a guy named Alan Horowitz, who's the guy growing up that you call your uncle, who's not really your uncle, literally taught me the business as a kid, and it was a local Philadelphia business. I got very interested at a young age working for him, and was fortunate enough, to have his partnership and support, and then grow that into a national company. And today, Campus Apartments houses about 25,000 college students in about 23 or 24 states. After that, she mentioned a firm called FS Investments. We started that in 2007, 2008, and the main notion of that was I thought it was unfortunate that most people have a choice of, stocks or bonds. And when it came to investing, that middle America's options were stocks and bonds, and you would hear like the 60-40 allocation and all of that. And yet, institutions, pension funds, or really high net worth people had the opportunity to do things in what's called alternative investing, hedge funds, private equity, venture capital, things like that. And I just thought there should be a way to kind of democratize that and allow that access to different people. So for example, we're going through some pretty turbulent markets this week. So you know on an instant basis whether you're up or down. Well, if you're in a private equity fund, you don't get that benefit or that worry, right? Generally, the lack of liquidity in those investments helps you get through a rocky time. Most people look at the market today and say, "Oh no, should I sell it? Should I buy it?" Like it's a lot of chaos. Alternatives kind of like let you weather a storm, in my view. I'm not giving financial advice, but in a longer period of time, you can have a longer time horizon to figure that out. And then after that, she mentioned Darko Capital. That's really my family office. The goal there is I love to do kind of early stage venture investing, where we back founders that, are real entrepreneurs that maybe have a unique idea where, capital is generally easier to come by for startups, but maybe they'll benefit from mentorship, leadership, or experience that we've had. And then lastly, we do, one of the owners of the Philadelphia 76ers and New Jersey Devils. So, one's going to be in the playoffs and one is not. So we're happy to talk about sports too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I should have called an audible and said, in fact, let's just spend this hour and you can help us save our retirement portfolios instead of talking about our theme of this Conference on World Affairs is lead, innovate, and impact. So I want to ask you questions about all of those things. And specifically, I want to start with innovation, because you've already touched on just a little bit the different types of things that you're doing. But even with things like Cred AI, it just seems like this is a real hallmark of who you are, is innovating. So I wonder if you'll talk a little bit about innovation, how you've innovated in your different ventures, but also if you think innovation's different today than maybe when you started out.
A long time ago. Right?
Yeah, back 10 years ago.
The way I look at innovation is I think you can innovate new businesses, and you hear everyone talking about AI and things like that, but I think you can innovate old and existing businesses. And so, so student housing is essentially the apartment business, right? Apartments have been around for hundreds of years, and as long as universities have been around, there's been student housing. Generally that was kind of a mom and pop business in each college town. Somebody owned a couple units or a duplex, rented out their upstairs. And so my view was, could I take a business that had been around a very long time and innovate it? And for me, that was do something that wasn't previously done, which was create national scale of something that was very localized, mom and pop type of business. And, a lot of people thought it was a bad idea. And the good news about being an entrepreneur, and what I always talk about so to me, leadership is also not being afraid to make a mistake and not being afraid to fail. And so for me, I was like, well, just because no one else has done it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. And, it started, we were founded in Philadelphia, and I went to Ohio, New Jersey, South Carolina, Georgia, started kind of regional, and then, through acquisition and other things went national. And the goal was, could you take something that you do, your best practices in a local manner, and how do you do that in a national manner, right? So for us, it was about people. Could you take, the apartment business is very much a people business, meaning that, for me, the student housing, I have people's most prized possession, which is their kids. So I think about that every day, but how do I get my staff to think about that, right? These aren't widgets. And so for me, it was, how do you make this on a more personalized level so that your staff gets up every day with the same goal, which is make sure these kids are having a safe experience, let them have fun within reason and not damage your place. And looking at my daughter Sage and a roommate to see if, no, I'm just kidding. And make sure they're safe, have a good experience, and make sure that the parents, but also the constituents, which is the university as well, think that you're doing a good job. And so that comes from repetition, policies, procedures, and kind of laying it out. And so, again, we did something that a business that's been around a really long time, and then just tried to stamp out something that was repeatable, and that's how we expanded it.
Is that similar to like what you're doing with a similar approach to like Cred AI?
So Credit AI is a business that we started it's going on 5-6 years. Problem that's been in existence for a long time. How do you get, particularly, we focused it on kind of mostly areas of younger people coming out of college that have no credit profile, because maybe that mom and dad paid for school or they got student loans or something like that. But when it goes to buy your first car, or in some cases you move to a big city after graduating and you can't sign that lease on your own because you don't have a credit profile. And so we thought that credit shouldn't just be about because you have the experience or track record. You might be a good risk just your first time coming out of something. And so what we did is we said, can we take debit card utilization and synthesize credit with that? Are they being responsible? Are they using their debit card in a manner where they're not trying to spend more than they make and things like that? So it's a little more complicated than that, but we created an algorithm that basically takes debit card usage and can report it to the credit bureaus in a synthetic way to mimic credit. And when you do that with college kids, so my daughter's credit score when she first started was 600 because she had no credit. Now she's at 720 using this card. Okay.
Your dad just shared your credit score.
Yeah, so, I didn't give out her social security number. So, but the benefit of that is, can we help people who need to get out there for the right reasons and buy things? Or you have the other side where we saw benefit that we didn't even expect. It is somebody could go through a divorce or a bankruptcy, and that could be really debilitating on their credit, and help them rebuild it. And so the goal for us is, how do we become a product that can help people? And so Starbucks has 400,000 employees. They were going through they just brought in a new CEO, so things have changed, but they were going through kind of a labor issue where their employees were not feeling appreciated. You saw striking, you saw this, and this is not atypical from a lot of things going on in corporate America. Well, we partnered with Starbucks to create, to give them a cred card. We branded one just for Starbucks. It's called the Siren Card, which has the logo of the Starbucks, logo on it. And we're also giving them early wage access. So what that means is, if you are an employee that has a Starbucks paycheck, you can pull down and borrow against that with no interest. Okay, because we know that your money's good and going to get into your account. So we wanted this to become a financial wellness tool.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like that's a little bit of a different type of innovation, but it seems like both of those stories bring together a common theme, that you see some kind of need in the environment, and then you create a solution to fill that need. How do you do that?
It's just an idea. I think it's, there's every day people have great ideas, and what's stopping them from executing on them? My view is, I've always had a saying, I don't think there's, why not me and why not now? Mm-hmm. And so just because I haven't done something before doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. And I feel, by the way, you're mentioning some of the successes. I have a laundry list of failures.
Well, you can tell us that too. Yeah. What was
I think I think it's important to admit it. And I always say it, especially when we're mentoring, younger kids coming up or people who've graduated starting out, don't be afraid to fail. And so for me, I think about, what is an idea that hasn't been done? First, figure out why it hasn't been done. Is it too expensive? Are there regulatory or legal reasons why you can't do that? Or some other reason, or just no one's put any effort into it.
Right.
And so that's kind of the way I can look at things.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. Okay, let's talk about impact. So through these ventures and many of the other things that you do, I am blown away by the positive impact that you have on the communities around you. Anything you want to highlight?
Well, I think impact is important. One, I think taking care of your team members, your employees, and making sure they're solid and steady is your first impact, right? Because you can change families' lives and be a good employer and be a good partner. I think beyond that, how do you make sure your organization allows for charitable activity in one way, shape, or form? And so, some companies have a program where they'll match anyone's charitable contribution and we'll give you this, okay? Or, we will give you a comp day to focus on that. Campus apartments, we will do things like, build houses in communities. We have a new charity called Team Impact, which it's actually unique. It partners with colleges and universities where it takes children that are with severe disabilities or terminal illnesses, but their dream was to be on the football team.
Yeah.
And we partner with athletic programs. I actually should talk to Rick about it. I see Justin and the chancellor here, so I'm going to bring it up to him in the back. When you think about partnering with schools to do this, and so you can then sign them for a day and they become a member of the team.
Wow.
And so it's about creating experiences, creating an environment to make people feel important. But I actually think it starts with making sure your employee base is really steady. How are you there in a time of need as an employer for your staff? Unfortunately, if you're in business long enough, you have team members who pass away, team members' children, spouses, things like that. And how can you support your members in a really tough time, not just the good times? And then hopefully that catches on, and that's what we try to do.
I like that. Do you want to talk about the stadium?
Do we
want to talk about
No, it's fine.
Okay.
So what Stephanie's talking about is the 76ers. We have played since 1995 in a building called the Wells Fargo Center, which was not owned by us. So we were a tenant in a building owned by the Philadelphia Flyers. And what we thought was in our best interest as an organization was to have a building that has amenities set kind of for the modern day, but also amenities that would help satisfy our fan base. And what does that mean? So, you all have the Ball Center here in Denver, which is a nice facility, actually built around the same time in the late 90s, same generation of buildings. But there's a wave of newer sports venues that are being built. Intuit Dome just opened for the LA Clippers, Chase Center for Golden State, Fiserv for Milwaukee, and there's a huge laundry list going on. And so we thought it was time to control our destiny and build our own home. And so we went on a kind of circuitous route of where we started versus where we ended, which was at first we were going to take it. It's currently, I don't know if you're familiar with where it is in Philadelphia. It's in what's called South Philadelphia in a sports complex. So it's very unique. It's the only place in the country where all the sports teams play in one spot. The football stadium, baseball stadium, and the arena for hockey and basketball are all in one parking lot. It's very unique. That said, we thought that it would make sense, and candidly, I thought it would make sense to move the arena to downtown Philadelphia and do something there and kind of revitalize the downtown. Went through a pretty long process of doing that, and ultimately, for a lot of reasons, came back together with our partners at the Flyers, and they're owned by a division of Comcast, and said, let's do this together and let's do it big. And so I wake up every day, we talk about goals, and I say to our team, I want to build the best live entertainment venue in the world in Philadelphia in 2030. And so I've set this kind of bold goal, and we're pretty excited about it. So we're going to do it in partnership with the Flyers and Comcast. And I think we'll get concerts, world events, you name it there. We have great experience because I mentioned earlier we own the New Jersey Devils and the Prudential Center, which is in Newark. And when you think about Newark, New Jersey, it's close. Its proximity to New York and Madison Square Garden, the Barclays Center, the UBS Arena in Long Island, and it's still the number 8 grossing arena in the country. In Newark, New Jersey, only having one team.
Wow.
So we're taking that kind of best-in-class operating experience and going to do something new and modern.
That's exciting. So it's coming. The deal is signed.
Deal is signed. Coming 2030.
2030. I'll be there.
Yes.
So I know there was another session that just let out. So if you just came in or you were at lunch before this, if you want to ask a question to David Adelman, just put your hand up. Someone will come around with a note card. If you're a student, I think Sage is asking the first question, but put S on there and put your name and we'll call you up just so everyone knows. I haven't seen hands going up, but we're going to need your questions. Awesome. Oh, good. See that?
We prompted it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So lead, innovate, impact. Great stories of impact. I like that you started with just having an impact on the people. I think that really resonated with me. I feel like that's really central. And I think that probably is because of your philosophy and approach to leadership.
Yeah, I mean, look, everyone has different perspectives, so I'm not saying I'm right, but I think it's not authentic and kind of bullshit, excuse my language, to just be a company that does all these things outside, but then treats your employees like shit or doesn't care. And so I just have a different motive. And again, I'm not saying I'm right. Lots of companies do it a lot of different ways, but kind of figure out what you want, what's important to you, and then project out from there. And I do believe that companies should be good corporate citizens beyond that and participate in their community and do things. And we certainly make sure at our various companies that we do that.
Yeah, but I think that reflects your your values and leadership. And you mentioned Starbucks. They've gone through some big leadership changes. It's kind of surprising for Starbucks employees to think or to not feel valued, because that was the whole premise of the organization. I interviewed their last CEO for my book, Inclusify, and that's like what they were built around philosophically. So I'd love to ask you I'm the director of the Center for Leadership. What's your David Adelman's philosophy on leadership?
Mine's, I don't want to say unique, but really rudimentary, because people say it, but they don't do it. I believe in having people that work for me and with me that are smarter than me in their given lane. And that is not a natural act for a leader. And I'll say that again. Most CEOs think that they have to be the smartest person in the room and have to have all the answers. And by the way, I've been around some really impressive CEOs who really are, and I'm like, wow, that's great. That's not me. And so I've gotten very comfortable in saying I don't know or I don't understand something. That takes time and confidence to be able to acknowledge and admit that. Most people don't want to admit they don't do that. And especially, I see I have a room here of, community members and what I'll say people with experience versus students. When you're out of school, starting a job, interning, or you generally feel like you don't want to say if you don't understand something. Fear of looking stupid, fear of, and to me, you're now, whatever that lesson or something somebody was talking about, you don't know what it means. And you might go years without knowing what that means, because you could have just taken 30 seconds and said, could you explain that again? I don't understand it. And so when I think about leadership, I'm like, get great people, let them be better at that given thing. That provides me with information to make a decision, and then I'll make a decision. But give me the smartest facts that I can get from the smartest people I can get. So my leadership is somewhat, I'm not a micromanager. And I believe in kind of a decentralized goal, environment where people can really do a great job. You have to trust them, and the trust is earned. Okay, so that's not a day one thing. People have to prove themselves. They have to prove their willingness to accept responsibility, accept failure, right? I think that's really hard for people to want to do, is accept failure. And I have a rule that I say all the time: make lots of mistakes, just don't make the same one twice. And so those are my principles. Work really hard. The other thing I say is bad news doesn't get better with time. Right? I don't care if you're a kid who does something wrong and you don't want to tell your parents, or you're in business and there's something that didn't happen, you lost a customer, you lost something, and you don't want to tell your boss. It does not get better with time. And so I just try to keep it simple with a couple things that I say to people, tell me when something goes wrong. And if you make a mistake, it's okay, just learn from it, right?
Absolutely. You've talked before, too, about sort of mentors and how mentoring really impacted you. I'm curious, one, if you'll share just why mentoring is so central to your beliefs. We have, of course, at the CFL, the Boulder CU Leadership Program. That's our mentoring program. We pair students with members primarily of the Boulder and Denver community for mentoring. I think they both benefit equally. But I'd love to hear just your mentoring story and then what you do now to mentor others.
Mentoring, and by the way, I don't think mentoring stops. So to me, it's the quest for learning. And so I don't care who it is. If someone has, so I'll talk about the latter first. I just want to learn about life and business and experience. Okay? And so if it's business, I want to know, hey, tell me about all the things you've done well. If you're in the widget making business and I don't know shit about making widgets, I'd like to learn about it, because maybe I'll pick something up from that and do it. Or in my personal life, okay, I'm now, I have 2 daughters in their 20s right now. What's that like? What's it like, what's it like when boyfriends come along? What happened? Embarrassing, Luke. But I want the experience. And so for me, I just want to learn. So that mentoring, that shouldn't ever stop, regardless of whether you're young and working or retired. and going there. That quest for knowledge keeps you active. So that's kind of my back end, that like I'm still learning, still mentoring, I just want to learn. Mentors growing up, obviously like I had a foundational mentor in my partner, Alan Horowitz, who taught me business, put up money for me to get started, and has been with me for over 25 years. And really just, along the way was able to kind of, say, here's my experience, you're going to pick your own path, but, you do your thing. And then other mentors, I have some mentors, one who just recently passed away, who was a mentor when it came to philanthropy and community engagement, and he was a real role model for me, a guy named Steve Kozin, who, he was a special guy who said, this is why it's your duty to give back to the community. And to me, like, mentors come in all shapes and sizes. And by the way, they don't have to be older than you. And I think there's a misnomer there. There are so many people, companies that I'm invested in where the founder is 10 or 15 years younger than me. And I'm like, wow, he or she is really smart, has some great experience. I want to learn. And so I don't think it comes in any shape, one size shape, or what it could be, how it fits.
I love that. How do you approach mentor? Oh, and let me say, if you have your questions, are we collecting them? Okay, great. Seth will go through and pick some questions out. What's your approach to mentoring? They don't have to be, I was going to say younger, but you just said they don't have to be younger, but to mentoring others.
What I'll do is, I share experience. I don't tell people what they should do. I think that's a shitty mentor. I think you want to be able to get enough information to draw your own conclusions. And so I will, share experience, or when someone says, I'm thinking about doing this for this career path, I'll say, well, that's interesting, but did you think about this? Did you think this might go wrong? There's only a handful of times where I'm like, that's a really bad idea, but I try to keep my opinion out of it, because I don't think that's the best way to give advice. But basically, like, what are your goals? What's your path for achieving the goals? And what would success look like? Okay. Because sometimes people get started on a journey and they don't even know what success is. They just want to like run out of the gate, right? You get young people like, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. How do you know if you're doing a good job?
It's a really good question. That sounds more to me like coaching, which we also offer from the Center for Leadership across campus, coaching. But it's like such a mindset shift that seems to fit with your overall leadership philosophy and humility of like, just ask good questions and don't always presume you're the person who knows the most in the room, because the person who knows the most in the room is always our students. And so I want to create some space for students to ask you some questions, if that's okay with you. We have 100%. A microphone up here. I'm going to warn you, Luke, you're going to ask the first question. You don't need to write it down. But I'm going to warn you that the microphone is wired, so don't try to run around the room with the microphone when you get it. But Seth will call all the other people, but I'm just going to call on you since that's how I roll. All right, Luke, come on up.
Well, thank you for talking to us today. I think it's really cool to hear everything you've done. And I was really impressed to hear about so many of the successful endeavors you've had. But as you mentioned, you've also had to deal with some of your own failures. And I was just going to ask, like, what approaches you use that you think determine whether these investments or that these businesses you're building become a success, and what things you do differently to ensure that they're going to go that way.
And don't leave yet, because you have to introduce yourself and say what school or college you're from.
Oh, sorry. My name is Luke Filion, and I'm in finance and accounting in the Lead School of Business.
Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. Judging failure is different for everyone. So one, it could be, a company runs out of money and like there's no chance of raising more, and it's a bad product, it was a bad idea. What was it, right? And so I look at why something fails. And in this, because we invest a lot in the startup space, lots of good ideas fail. It wasn't the right time, the right markets, or was it the right leader? And you never know. And so I always look back. There have been a handful of times where I've taken a CEO or a founder that we've invested in and their business didn't work, but I've backed them in their next business, right? Were they honest, ethical, moral, worked hard? And I said, shit happens sometimes. It was a great idea, wrong time. And luck has a lot to do. Like anyone you're listening to that's ever sitting up here or has done some things who doesn't say that luck doesn't play a part of their success is full of shit. I really want you to understand that, okay? Now, I think you do things to create your luck, okay? You position yourself for that to happen. But I think that's really important for people to understand. But, failures, failures come in a number of ways. There's financial failures, but there's also failures upon yourself in the way you conducted yourself. So I think I said this once to a class of Stefanie, but I'll say it for this group. One of my biggest early failures was we had an apartment building that was in between two properties we owned, okay? And owning that would have completed a block of real estate. This was 25 years ago, give or take, 20-something years ago. And I said to my partner, my mentor, I'll deal with him and see if we can strike a deal to buy it. And the guy was older than me, much older than me. And I'm thinking old now, maybe he's my age now, which is interesting. But the guy was an asshole. The guy was an absolute asshole who didn't appreciate that some young guy was trying to negotiate and just treated me like crap. And really was just an ass. And I remember getting so angry and taking it personally that at some point, he just rubbed me the wrong way. We had put a bid in, he had said no, whatever. And I was just like, I'm not doing business with this asshole. And we lost the deal. And guess what? He sold it to somebody else. And my partner said to me, he goes, well, you showed him, didn't you? And now, every couple of weeks when I'm in Philadelphia or drive around that portfolio, guess what? We still don't own that building 25 years later. And it was because, so this is a valuable lesson. I let my ego get in the way. I was young and cocky and didn't appreciate how I was being treated. And I took my eye off the ball. What did I say the objective was? Buy the building. I wasn't looking to make a friend. I didn't need a golf partner. I didn't need a dinner date. But I let my ego get in the way. And so that's a valuable thing to learn in business, is ego is dangerous. It's healthy and it's motivating, but you got to know where that is. And so, like I said, failure comes in all forms. That was an early failure I had because that was my fault and that was purely ego. I have a handful of venture businesses that were great ideas that either the financing markets weren't open at the time, or it was just we couldn't get the product adopted by people, and then down the road later you had the product come to bear. Best story I'll tell you, and I wasn't an investor in it. One of my best friends from growing up, when the cell phone first came out, invented something that you stuck. This is before the iPhone, but if you remember those Nokia phones and those other phones, he invented something that would attach to the phone to hold your credit card, and it had a mirror on it. And no one was interested in a case on a phone back then. Okay, he was 10 years too early, right? It was a billion-dollar idea, right? Maybe more, I don't know. Everyone's got something on their phone or attaches a case or does something. And it was just the wrong time. And so, and we talk about it all the time. Failure comes in lots of different forms. Sometimes it's your fault, sometimes it's not. And so I think that's important because I think people have to not be afraid to get back up and try it again.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Seth, any other questions in there?
Yes, Jack, come on up.
Ooh, ooh.
By the way, there's very few names on these student cards.
Oh, that makes it hard. Hi, Jack.
How's it going? I'm Jack. I'm a real estate student at the Leeds School of Business. My question for you was, as an individual who's had so much success at such a young age, did you find any difficulties or uncomfortability when managing employees that were older than you, or just how did you go about garnering respect from individuals that might make assumptions about you just right off the bat just because you're young?
That's a really good question. What year are you, Jack?
I'm a sophomore.
Great. Good question. Yeah,
So I said how, when he was at such a young age and had so much respect or had so much success, how did he go about uncomfortable situations when managing employees that were older than him, or garnering respect from those that it might have just been an awkward dynamic?
So great question. And I think, respect is earned. It is not forced. And so, my first experience with employees that were older than me was in campus apartments in the real estate business. I was fortunate because the uniqueness was there were people that I had worked with as a college intern, and I even worked there in high school, but summers and, pre-college and during college, that ultimately worked for me later on. And so they saw that I wasn't afraid of hard work. And that respect doesn't just come from the title, right? You have to, and I started at the bottom and worked my way up. But, the respect comes that they remember that when it was snowing out, that I was out there shoveling paths with them. They remember that even in my early years of working, if I was wearing a suit and I was at work and there was a construction job and somebody needed help holding something up, I helped them. I didn't care if I got dirty. And so I think it really is, how are you treating them? And how do they understand that you're there to help make their life better? And I think that's part of the experience is that, what's your job as a leader? Like I never say like I'm a boss. Like that to me has a negative connotation. I don't know how you feel about it, Stefanie, but like for me, like leaders lead by, either not being afraid to do the job that someone else has done, or asking questions, or learning from the people who work for them. And so for me, being able to do that. Now, things were hard, like firing my first person as a young person, that scared the crap out of me. I was sick to my stomach. When you fire somebody and, they have a family and different things, like I didn't like that. But sometimes it's necessary. And so tough decisions, you can't have the reward without the pain. And so a lot to learn.
Thank you.
Great question. All right, Seth, who do we got next?
I don't know, but it's a question about women leaders and feminine traits in leadership. Who's that? Okay, not a student question. Well, come on up. I only have a couple other student-identified questions.
Thank you for coming to ask your question.
Thank you so much for being here. Very exciting to hear what you have to say. I was just thinking more in general. When you think about leaders today, do you feel like the leaders that we are selecting in businesses as well as electing in our national governments and nations, do you feel that they are leaders based on leadership traits and capabilities? That's kind of my question, number one. Number two, do you feel that our leadership culture today is just towards women and feminine traits of leadership?
I'll take the second. Thanks for the questions. I'll take the second one first. I would say in the last 5 to 7 years, I have funded more female-led businesses than male-led businesses. For a number of reasons. One, it might have been the product, it might have been the leaders themselves, but like their ability, women, what I have found is, and this is a generalization, but female-led businesses, startups particularly, because you have to differentiate them versus like a public company. I don't want to speak to that. There is if you take someone in their late 20s, early 30s, male, female, this is just David Adelman's experience, so I'm not saying it's fact. And what I've noticed is 90% of the time, the females, at least have been more thoughtful in their decision-making process. They may have gotten to the same conclusion, but I liked the kind of like the lead up, the build up to it. And so I found kind of that build up really interesting. And, from the quarterly reports they put out, the detail level there, to the EQ that's shown. And so again, to answer your question, I think women certainly in venture capital. Let's talk about sports. I think this is an amazing moment for women in business, for women in sports. With all the different leagues coming out, you're gonna see a lot more from. WNBA has obviously been really well stated, but there's the emergence. You're gonna hear a lot. You heard it here first. The female volleyball league is going like really crazy. Female soccer, and so women's sports I think is the next frontier. There's going to be a huge amount of capital behind that to do. So, I think this is a great moment for women in business.
And can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Yeah, I was also curious, going back to your personal leadership and the companies that you've started. You spoke a lot towards being fair to the employees. What about your impact on the environment and sustainability?
Yeah, I think it depends on the business. So, as a developer, there are standards environmentally called LEEDs. Okay, not to be confused with the Leeds School of Business. And so, we try in everything we build to do it to some level of sustainability. LEEDs is more of a moniker that's used for commercial office buildings than apartments, but there's qualifications called Earthcraft and others that we try to build to. So we do account for it. We put, 15 years ago, we put low flush valves on every toilet in our property. So, I can't tell you that I'm an A+ student, but we're doing pretty well.
And are you incentivizing that into your culture of like behaviors within the workforce that shows a commitment to the environment and sustainability?
Interestingly, I would tell you, at least from our student business, we see more requests coming from the bottom up from the students, their innovation. I mean, I can't tell you how long ago we got asked about composting and separating trash before it even came about and stuff like that. Every one of our properties had electric chargers, 5 years ago, right? And so we're there. And then I think from a culture perspective, and candidly, it depends on where in the country you are. I think different parts of the country prioritize it differently. And so we try to adjust based on where the business is.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the question. All right, Seth, if you don't know someone's name, you can also just read their question.
Yeah. I think this could be a student question. I'll just read on their behalf. When you think about students or higher ed communities, are there any underappreciated problems or ideas that you think are worth solving? Stuff that doesn't get talked about but could actually make a difference.
Ooh.
I mean, look, I'll say because I'm really opinionated, and some people agree and some won't. I think that we're sitting here in a university, and I think a college education is really important, but I don't think college is for everyone. And I think there's a percentage of society that's been forced to college that might not have been the right fit for them. And so from a personal initiative in Philadelphia, I'm going to build a $1.5 billion arena, and I need to make sure that there's a workforce there to build it. It's going to be 9,000 construction jobs. And so we as an organization are looking about how we can invest in VOTEC schools and create a workforce that's ready to not only build the buildings, but facilities management and other people there. And so I don't know if this is the answer to the question that whoever asked it was looking for, but I don't think college is for everyone. And I think we have to do a better job of creating another path that isn't filled with, I don't want to use the word shame, but I think some people think that if you don't go to school, you're not, going down the right path. And, you think about other options about people going into the military and other things that, happen, and maybe school's later for them. So I think giving people a choice, because the flip side is I'm not sure there's a huge amount of value of forcing somebody to go to college, come out with a huge amount of student debt, and they were forced into a degree that doesn't really translate to skills that they have or interests they have.
Oh, I think that's fair. Thank you. I think the sustainability question was probably music to Chancellor Schwartz's ears. That's one of our large commitments at CU, so thanks for that question. One more? Yeah.
Okay. Let's turn the attention on you now.
All right.
A little bit more. A personal question. How do you manage the stress and balance work, life, etc., all while maintaining your focus and the business acumen required to operate at your level?
Well, that's an assumption that I manage it. I think, and I'll say this, I love what I do. And I think it starts with that. I don't feel like I've ever worked a day in my life. And I feel blessed by that. But, I try to have a routine. My routine is, and, my kids make fun of me, I'm in bed by 10 o'clock every night. I get up at 5. I work out at 6. And that's my time to set myself up for the day, whatever I'm doing. And so for me, I try to, I'm not always successful, I'm trying harder to appreciate moments where I'm not, working. I have a great tradition with my daughter Sage, who's sitting up front, so I'm going to embarrass her, that when I go to dinner with her, I hand her my phone so that I'm not on the phone anymore. I would say that was my Achilles heel in, going out with my wife, going out with our friends, is that I was not present. And so, not perfect with all of this, but being present is important. I would say taking care of yourself physically has been a huge priority of mine. I think the better you feel, the more energy you have, the better, husband, father you can be, or a better employer you can be. And so, I'm trying to reprioritize things that are important. So I think it starts with health. I think it starts with, creating time and space in relationships, and being your best self. And so, I tried meditation. I can't do it. Okay, I really tried. Haley would love me to do yoga. I can't do it. Okay, my mind's racing. It just goes on to other things. But I like to work out. I like to exercise, and so I've got my yoga. And that's my way of doing it. And so, I think everyone's got a different way. But I think figuring out how to be healthy and lead a healthy lifestyle, it kind of starts with that, and then you can kind of be, well-rounded for everybody else.
Oh, I like that. Okay, I think we can do one more. Yeah. Seth, do you have another one in there?
Yes. Let's go back to failure,
We got many.
Everyone wants to know.
because you've only mentioned a couple. We need more.
Yeah.
So when do you know that something has failed? For example, when is it time to let it go and just give up and move on to the next thing?
That's a great question. I have one of our businesses now that I'm not going to mention, but where I think some in my inner circle are like, when, maybe we should let this one go. And I'm like, I'm stubborn too. So I think the hard part is if you're driven and you're stubborn, and you don't like to quit, how do you still justify that with everything I said earlier about sometimes failure happens? And so in my mind, if I'm working on something, I'm like, well, if I leg this out 6 more months, could the customer base pick up, or could someone want to buy it? And so it's not easy. The answer is failure comes in a lot of forms. Is it financial failure, or is it, failure in, I'll share this. I was involved in a business where I invested heavily and I believed in the CEO of the company, and he turned out to be a crook, and the guy's going to go to jail. But I wound up investing a lot of money, and that guy said David Adelman's my largest investor, and so lots of people said, oh, well, if David is investing in it, I'm going to invest. And the guy was a really bad guy. Fortunately, kind of the justice system works. He'll go to jail. And I often say to myself, what could I have done differently there? Right? And so, like I said, failure comes in lots of different forms. It could be the business, it could be the person. You never know.
Okay, one more.
One more? Let's do it. Let's go. I'm in no rush, so I'm...
Another failure one.
Sage,
Another failure. No, just
Sage said to ask you about your sneaker collection.
Oh, is that what she said?
Ooh.
Oh,
Yeah, Sage.
So it's funny. I actually wore nice sneakers today. But I think one of the hallmarks for me is success for me was not wearing a tie ever again. I've kind of made that personal commitment that I would prefer not to wear a tie ever again. And so I generally dress in jeans and, Nike sneakers or other sneakers and, a sweater or something like that. But I just want to be comfortable at this stage of life.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, last question, Seth. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, the only legitimate question, it's kind of a challenging one, but I'm going to ask it anyhow because it's here on the card and it's from a student and it was out in the public realm anyway. Talk a little bit about some of the resistance to the initial proposal for the new stadium and the location within the city and some of the possible harmful, impacts from some members of the community and how you've addressed that and dealt with that aspect.
Yeah. So it is in the public realm. 3 years ago, I came out with this, multi-billion-dollar plan to revitalize a really dying part of Philadelphia. I was proud of the fact that my partners in the Sixers and I proclaimed that we were going to be one of the few if not only teams, because it's pretty rare, it's not zero, but pretty rare, teams to not take any public money to build our building. And we were going to do the unprecedented thing of giving the city of Philadelphia a $50 million community benefits agreement, when the largest in the history of Philadelphia was $5 million. And a community benefits agreement is really about investing back in local communities or job programs or things like that. And so, as someone who loves Philadelphia, I was like, people are going to love this. We're not asking for public money. We're giving money. I'm taking a dying part of downtown Philly. I'm like, this is going to be great. Then you learn that, there's always lots of opinions out there. And those opinions came from, we like it where it is. Why are you changing something that's been there for 50 years? And we don't agree. And there was an adjacent community, the Chinatown community, which was adjacent to where we were looking to do this. There was a history of another city doing an arena in a Chinatown that displaced lots of people. The difference in our project was we were not going to displace one building in that community or one job there. We were actually taking what was a dying mall in downtown Philadelphia to repurpose it. And so my view was I was taking one entertainment complex and replacing it with another. And lots of lessons learned there. We were fortunate enough that this promoted a different outcome, but I learned that just because I think something's a really good idea doesn't mean it always is. I learned that you can be honest and well-intended, which we were, and people still might not care or don't believe you. And that was the hardest part for me, is really coming at this from a place of wanting to do something that is really unprecedented, which is, build a multi-billion-dollar arena without any public, city money, and just get crucified as if I had some other agenda. And it turned, this is all public, it turned into a real, I'm a capitalist, so I must be evil type of thing, versus I love my city and I want to give back. And as I said to everyone, two things could be true. I can care about Philadelphia, and I can build a for-profit venture that would be good for the city, create 10,000 jobs, and be good for the 76ers. So I never denied that we were doing this so it would be good for us, but why couldn't it be good for other people as well? And for whatever reason, that was a tough message for some people to understand. So I aged about 20 years in 3 years going through that process.
I didn't want to say anything, but
Yeah.
no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, so we are going to wrap up here because I know there's another group coming in just in any moment now, but I want to just pause for a round of applause to thank David Adelman. It was really amazing. We can't loiter in this room because I know this other group is coming in, but I'm sure Jack at least wants to say hello again to you, and then we'll all clear out. Thank you all so much for coming.
And thank you to Stefanie.
Oh, thanks.